I'm Cecile Andrews, and I teach a class at Antioch, Participatory Communication for Social Change, and I think of myself as a community educator. And that is not only educating the community, but using community to educate. I've written 3 books, and the last 2, Slow is Beautiful, and the new one, Less is More. Well, I had been talking about voluntary simplicity for a long time, and you know, voluntary simplicity is about less is more, that if you consume less, you have more life, both for people and the planet. But everybody gets like, oh God, voluntary simplicity is like, you know, self-deprivation. And so I thought I have to come up with another way of talking about it. And I saw this quote by Saint-Exupéry, who said that if you want someone to build you a boat, you don't just give them the tools and the wood. You teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. In other words, we have to have a vision. We can't just wag our fingers and tell people it's going bad. So slow food, when I discovered slow food, which is a movement that first, it was kind of a joke, you know, in Rome, you know, when McDonald's moved in and they thinking, we can't have fast food in Italy. So they started slow food, and it spread around the world, just like on its own. And when you have something like that, you have to pay attention to, well, what's going on here? And the heart of slow food, really, it's not just eating well and eating good food, but it's this coming together, talking, laughing, good wine, good conversation. To me, it's the image of the joyful community. And this is so important because all the research on happiness shows that this is the core of happiness, these relationships with other people. In this country, we think if you're rich, you'll be happy, but it doesn't work. After a certain point, more money does not correlate with happiness. People seem to not be aware of what's going on. We've been told all of our lives that, oh, America is the best place, we're so lucky. And now, we are, in terms of life expectancy, we are 50th in the world. We are way down. In the 50s, we were #1. In the 80s, we were in 11th place, and we have dropped so fast. And basically, it's because what people care about in this country, again, that profit is everything. And so, because profit is everything, they're finding any way they can to save money. And so they're doing this most of all with food, that they're doing anything they can to sell stuff to people that isn't good for them, that doesn't even taste any good. And so we all know that, you know, our health is bad in this country and it's going to keep getting worse, unfortunately. And so, you know, the obesity, the diabetes, the cancer, heart attacks, all these things are related to food. And so, you know, we're talking about healthcare reform, but the real thing that's going to make a difference is when people understand what makes them healthy. But once again, we have this connection with food and people. The biggest thing that makes people healthy and happy is relationships. That social isolation is as bad for you as smoking 1 pack of cigarettes a day. But the thing is how do we gather with people? We usually gather around food. So this food and people are so connected. And that if you eat plastic, toxic food, you're going to have plastic, toxic relationships. It's kind of the thing of getting back in touch with nature. It's nature outside, but it's getting in touch with your real nature, which isn't about being #1, being successful, being famous. Your real nature has to do with connection with other people. So all these things are incredibly bound up together, and so slow food has become, for me, this tremendous symbol of the joyful life and being in connection with each other and being in connection with nature. And I think that's what we want to do to inspire people, to lure them into change, instead of just saying, if you don't change, this, and this is going to happen. You know, it's nice to give people information. People need to know what's happening out there. But when people get too much negative information, they turn off. And it's interesting, they have found that often when people feel too anxious about what's going on in the world, they shop more. Well, it's interesting. Shopping makes people feel bad because it's like a false promise. You know, you get this and you're going to be happy. But what happens, it's like any addiction. You think, oh, I got a little, and you have, I think of it as like, you have a little rush. I think of it as the Costco high. Like, oh, wow, that was great. But it dies right down. And then you go out and you get more and more because you think, well, this is, I didn't quite get it that time. Maybe I'll get it with the next purchase. And so people go into debt. And it's ironic that, you know, we have been living as a culture with no savings until recently. With this recession, people have started saving again. But what we found is during this time when people are cutting back, they've discovered that shopping does make them unhappy, because what you're trying to do is get your happiness from stuff. And you got to get it from other people. And when you shop, you're spending all your time focusing on stuff, and you're also focusing on what you look like. You know, how am I going to look to other people? You're looking at advertisement. And what this does is this creates a narcissistic personality. And a narcissistic personality doesn't have social skills. To have good social skills, to connect with other people, you've got to be interested in them. You can't just be thinking, oh, you know, what are they thinking of me? How am I coming across? But that's what shopping encourages you to do. One of the things we do to build neighborhood in our community is we try to set up a lot of different groups that allow people to come together and talk and get to know each other. And one of the things we do is have a voluntary simplicity group. And it's so much fun. It's a small group, and people each week, we do it weekly, talk about how they've simplified that week. And what we end up doing is laughing a lot. And we learn from each other. And we are inspired by each other because we tell each other our stories. A lot of what's happening, because this is happening all over Seattle, you know, Sustainable Ballard, Sustainable Wallingford, food is a big focus of it now. People are very excited about learning to garden, about learning to can, about having backyard chickens, about getting together and helping each other build a chicken coop. I mean, it used to be that we'd have barn raisings, and now we can have chicken coop raisings. And I think if people don't remember their ancestors and their past, they're not going to care about the people in the future, because we feel we're all alone, we're individuals, and we have to feel connected. So we're really trying to create this culture in which we feel we're all in this together. That now we have this culture in which it's every man for himself. Very individualistic, very lonely, and so again it comes back to this core of connection and caring. So that's what's so great about slow food, local neighborhood stuff. It is this idea that you're supposed to be enjoying yourself. Well, the thing that's important about slow food that I was so attracted to was, one, they have this joyful community. But then they say, well, you know, how is the food grown? And so they look at the ecological effects of what you're eating. And then they say, well, what are the corporations doing who are getting this food? And they look at the social justice part of it. And to me, that is so important, that none of this is separate. That, again, creating this culture in which we understand we're all in this together. That means you have to put the economy, the ecology, social justice, human happiness, all of those things have to come together, and somehow they do through food. When people eat together, they come together as equals. What I want people to do as well, they have good conversation, and that we're supposed to be learning from each other, and that's the way you grow and change, of coming together and talking, telling your stories, laughing, learning to understand your own ideas, and so that's the vision, the joyful community of eating together, talking together, and learning together.